Welcome back, guys, after a bit of a hiatus to Borderline Genius. I think this is our ninth episode now. By way of introduction, my name is Andrew, Melbourne-based game designer based in Australia. I'm the creator of this little guy, a Footy Feud, which is an AFL licensed product, licensed by our Australian Football League here in the land of Oz. And also, this game is soon to be coming to market. Getting really excited about this one. Officially licensed by Marvel, that will hit our major retailers in September. But that's not why we're here. We're here today to talk to the crew from That Sound Game. So we have Nat and Cam on the show / podcast today, and we met in person a couple of weeks ago now, and I'm in awe of what you guys have done, and don't say that lightly. So yeah, look forward to telling the Borderline Genius community a bit more about your story, the wins that you've had, and where to from here. So looking forward to a fun next 45 minutes or so, guys.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for inviting us on, Andrew. For distinction, I'm Cam, and this is Nat.
And I'm quite surprised you wanted to talk again after we ranted at you for 3 hours.
Well, you did pay for dinner for me, guys. So, this is the least I could do.
But you owe us. That was not some sweet bribe to be on your podcast.
That most certainly was not. And I did not intend it to be that way. Do not worry. But it was a cracking dinner as well, have to say.
It was. Good recommendation from you.
It was.
So,
see?
While Nat does the introduction, I'm just going to move our pup because she's snoring. So
she's snoring so bad.
The team mascot for That Sound Game. It is just
Do you want to see before we move her?
Oh, she's heavy.
All right. This is Meatball.
I think Sneezing Meatball definitely has to be on the expansion.
Inbred, but she's a rescue, so don't judge us.
Yeah.
But we need to put her to bed because it'll ruin the quality of your podcast. It's a French bulldog named Meatball, and we all know the hazards of that, but we got offered her by a vet, and what can you say? No, we don't want that beautiful dog.
We're certainly not.
Okay.
Adorable. Cool. Absolutely adorable. But guys, I guess like a good place to start would be how That Sound Game got off the ground again. We'll get into, no doubt, the next 40 minutes or so, all the wins that you've had and all the learnings and whatnot. But yeah, keen to rewind to the very start of the journey and what got you on this crazy roller coaster in the first place.
All right, I'll start. I guess I have to be the one to start the story because that's where it actually began. I was drunk on a couch with a friend during COVID, and I am not a gamer per se. I'm a drinker and a yeller of games. So I love a good party game, and on that particular evening we had set up Articulate, which is in the realm of games I really love, but I more love like a Taboo or a Pictionary or something. And long story short, the friends that we were with had a massive fight. The game didn't happen. And
spewing. Yeah,
but you can all imagine during COVID, like a lot of relationships broke up.
Yeah.
So this was not uncommon. So they fired up, they left, and I was just kind of left with a friend at a table with Articulate, which is a game where you move around a board and you have to communicate an idea through language. And we weren't going to play the game. So I just started pulling cards and said, oh, well, I think the first one that came out was like a musical instrument. And I said, oh, well, why don't you just make the sound of this? And one of my friends was quite shit at it, and another one was quite good. And I was like, oh, that was kind of funny and good. And then we pulled more cards, and they got a bit more obscure. And I was like, what if you took your hands away? Like, what would that be like? And we were like, this is really funny. Like, this is a good time. But I'm also a small business owner in Australia and always kind of, I don't really operate without that entrepreneurial business hat on. And so even despite the fact that we were like having a lovely time and laughing and what have you, I was like, wait, why aren't there like games that have sounds and you do this?
Mm.
Because we all understand the mechanics of a game like Pictionary. There's an idea and the rules are you draw it. We understand the mechanics of a game like Taboo or Articulate. There's an idea and you have to convey it through words, but there's certain words you can't say. We understand charades. You have to do mime, actions, what have you. But what if you had to do sounds but remove your hands? It just seemed like really odd to me in that moment that that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so we kept playing all night and kind of like shooting the shit, and I was writing ideas down. And then the next day I was like, I think this might be something. So fast forward 4 or 5 months,
Yeah.
I was quietly developing this thing that initially I had thought would be called What's That Sound? Long story short, that's taken, blah, 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 caused us all kinds of issues.
Yeah.
And then decided that I would do a pitch to Cam, Shark Tank style.
Clipboard and everything.
Dressed up in the suit, got the clipboard. I was like, you do this, you do that. Except I wasn't being so like
But you're using your
movement
hands.
orientated because
Yeah,
my hands are behind my back.
Of
And at
course,
that
yeah.
time, we had sweatbands on our hands so that you couldn't move.
Like
But
handcuffs.
yeah, but then we realized you can't put like sweatbands or handcuffs in your game because the expense is way too high.
Yeah.
And like trying to export like handcuffs all around the world, it's not going to work. So it just became clasping behind the back.
Yeah.
So I
Honesty
kind
is the
of
best policy.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, anything that goes through customs, clearly, also good.
Yeah.
So I pitched to Cam and
Yeah, and
So how did the pitch go, Cam? So on the receiving end of it, what was it like to receive a pitch for this game? A bit quirky, a bit out there.
well, I should mention that we're now partners in life and in business. We started off as partners in life, so Nat was keeping the secret from me. And
yeah, what did you think I was going to pitch to?
honestly, like I'm the kind of person I can just compartmentalize things. So I'm just like, okay, something's going on in the background. I'm not going to pay that too much attention to it. It's sort of just happening. Great. But then, yeah, you sort of outed yourself in like a message. You were talking to someone else about it, and you sort of outed yourself like board game. Anyway, so again, I didn't really like pay attention. I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And then Nat pitched the game to me, and I was like, this is nuts, but I think it's a really good idea, and I love a creative project. I always like, I love creating things. I love trying to remind adults how to be playful and how to connect with their inner child. So I mean, our house has like Nerf guns all over the place, and like the toys are for me as much for Meatball as what they are for me. So this really aligned with like sort of my life mission and goal, and I was like, this is great. Yeah, let's do it. And very quickly, like once we finished the product, actually at the same time we were building a business as much as we were building a board game. And I think that that's part of the reason why it sort of set us up for success. And a lot of it is all the lessons that Nat's learned in her previous business, and I guess that I've also learned from my corporate job. So we've got a lot of that to be thankful for. But very quickly it stops being about creating a board game and it starts being about creating and maintaining a business, is my take on it.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic reframe, right? Like it's not just about, and it's funny that you mentioned Shark Tank, because something that the sharks would always say, right, is like you have a great product, but you don't have a business. Or if the potential investee is trying to convince the investors that I do have a business, it's like, yeah, but it's worth about 10% of what you're asking for. So I'm either going to completely cripple your valuation or I'm just not that interested. So I guess like, you know, you got the idea. You went from idea to action pretty quickly, right? Like in terms of refining the actual product itself, and kind of realised you'd get a bit of a home run straight off the bat. But how did you even kind of go about like dividing time, energy, prioritization? Like how did you go about then like building the business side in conjunction with, because you're first-time game designers, right? So you're kind of figuring out how to do this stuff and building a business at the same time. How'd you go about that?
We can
Um,
probably talk to that.
yeah, so from a game creation point of view, which probably everyone on this podcast or anyone who is going down this journey themselves, you start with scraps of paper. Ours were in jam jars. You pull them out. We felt like we really like upgraded when we went to Officeworks and
Oh,
like printed
absolutely.
words on color cards and cut them out. Um, so I think from a creation standpoint, you can conceptualize and create your game with the most basic tools available to you,
Yeah,
and you can test and play and engage people with little to no money or experience at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
Because the mechanism of play in and of itself is what a joy, what a beautiful thing to be cutting paper in the middle of COVID and putting in jam jars and being like, we made a game.
Yeah,
um, but in terms of the business aspect, and I kind of find it funny now because now that we are more part of board game communities and what have you, I thought the way that I thought about the game was normal. But what I'm finding out is that it's not normal.
yeah,
I always envisaged a board game to be a global commodity,
yeah,
even if it is in jam jars. Why did I create this idea, engage my partner, work my butt off, invest the money that we did? Hell, I took a
yeah,
second job to pay for this idea.
yeah,
But why did I do that if I didn't think that it had scope?
yeah,
And maybe that's because I've had a small business in Australia for a long time, so I realized how small that glass ceiling is. But I always thought of this game being global. I never thought of it being in Australia. And what I've learned from the wonderful people that I've met through the communities that we're in online, Andrew, is that there is a mindset in Australia that games are for Australia and that breaking out into the world, it's like a really scary conundrum.
yeah,
Um, I just never had that. I always had a view that, okay, if we have a party game, how do we need to promote it? We would not promote it through our social channels because who wants to follow our Instagram or Facebook? The amount of money that we would have to put into uh, creating any kind of following on our social media would be so far above what we're capable of as
yeah,
independent designers.
Yeah.
yeah,
So how would we leverage a game like this? We would use influencers in the gaming space, in creative art space, in
Beatboxes.
beatboxers. We would use people in theatre schools, theatre
yeah,
kids, what have you, who have their own following. And we would introduce this game to them and get them to create content because they have a worldwide following. And so they would then send the message of this game out to their followers, but their followers are all around the world. So we would have to have fulfillment all around the world.
Mm.
yeah,
And I have felt a little bit taken aback that that's not the common thinking in Australia. Um, for me, that just seemed very natural, and I don't say that in the sense of um, I feel smarter than anyone or what have you, but it just seemed obvious to me that
yeah,
games are for everyone. Bringing joy to people is for everyone. It's not dependent upon your physical labor or resources in this country. You have the
mm,
ability to touch people all around the world because you created something fantastic that can reach lots of people if you set up the mechanics. Whereas the small business that I have to physically be there and people have to physically be in Melbourne. That's an
yeah,
actual real limitation.
yeah,
And so to remove that made me feel like the world was our oyster. So from day one, I just set us up for the world to be our oyster.
Yeah. I think also to add to that, I think PAX last year was a real defining moment for us, and
Yeah.
we're so grateful for the Australian Board Game Forum for inviting us to that, because we got the opportunity to test our game at PAX with people. And
Yeah.
at that point, what we were going to do is we were going to launch a Kickstarter, because that's what people told us, that that's the path that we had to go. And the more people we played with at PAX who actually genuinely liked our game, they wanted to buy it straight away. And we had to say to them, no, it would be a Kickstarter. It will be available in 6 months. And they're like, what's a Kickstarter? And so we really had to think at that
Small red
point.
flag.
We had to think at that point, our target audience, do they actually know what Kickstarter is? And they didn't. So
They have no idea.
yeah,
They don't know what Kickstarter is. They have no idea what Board Game Geek
yeah.
is. They just want to drink and play a fun game.
Yeah, and so we were really quickly reminded, like, let's go back to the initial strategy, which is to let's go where our audience is. And our audience, a lot of them, they're on TikTok. So that's where we took our content, and that's worked really well for us.
Yeah. And then even like that's great perspective, Cam, and that, and so much to kind of dive into that as well. I think even working as a team, like Nat, that mindset has come so easily to yourself. It's like, well, we're going to go big with this, and we're going to almost reverse engineer the standard way to do this. Cam, how, even though you're not in the gaming industry either before this venture,
Yep.
how did that narrative kind of feel like almost being pitched to in a way that's like, we're going to do something that's different, it's a bit unconventional, it's not the norm, because almost convincing yourselves that this is the right move is almost step one, right, when you're working with somebody before you then commit to the path ahead?
Yeah, I think we're pretty lucky that we're cut from the same cloth. Like when I was 25, I sold everything back in South Africa and I moved here on my own to start a life for myself. So being a bit adventurous and just giving something a go, I think that we're very much aligned in that. Like so much to the point that we sort of need to be like, okay, do we need to pause here? We need to remind each other, do we need to pause here and think a bit more strategically instead of just like going? We just both have that in us, that we would rather try something and fail than rather not try anything at all.
And it's interesting that you posed that question to Cam, because I seem like I've got the big vision and I'm gung-ho and what have you. But actually, after we had PAX and we did the collaboratory and we had all these people playtesting our game and what have you, and we were boxed at that time. We were prototyped, we were ready to go. It was actually me on the couch, like not feeling good, like saying to Cam, I feel like, it's not like Kickstarter's not right for us.
Yeah.
We would have to invest like $10,000, $15,000 of money that we don't have to advertise a Kickstarter that no one that wants our product cares about.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'd get funded, or we could just back ourselves and spend that 10, 15 grand on doing our product, like actually printing it, and then be like, well, shit, we've got all this product, we better make something happen.
Yeah.
And Cam was like, yes, great, yes, that feels right. And then I remember, like probably 2 months into manufacture, we dumped all our money. I'd taken another job. And Cam has a family back in South Africa that she supports, and I felt like Cam had invested a lot of belief in me that as a businesswoman, I knew what I was doing. And there were times where I just wanted to like shrivel up and cry and be like, wow, everyone tells us this is how you create a board game. This is how you get from A to B or A to C, A to Z. And we just did what felt right for us. And there was a period of time where I was feeling really vulnerable and unwell, and like maybe I'd let her down the garden path, because it just felt like party games didn't exist in that world. But then I'd
Yeah.
asked us to invest all our money in this.
Mm.
And so that was a challenge in the relationship, and I didn't really open up to Cam about that at the time. I think something that we don't often speak about in these sorts of podcasts and what have you is that there's a partner on the other side of this.
100%.
Whether it's the partner in business or whether it's your life partner, in this case, it's both.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a partner on the other side who's believing in your dreams, believing in the risk that you're taking,
Yep.
allowing that risk to happen, supporting your successes and your failures. And when you're the person, the creative who has the dream and the idea, it's an extraordinarily vulnerable situation to be in,
Yeah.
to ask the person that you love, and in this case I love and work with,
Mm.
to throw caution
Yeah.
to the wind and let's go for it.
Take a punt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a punt with not much evidence that this had really worked for anyone else,
Yeah.
by the way, because the
Yeah.
more forums we went on, the more we got told how it should be. And actually, that's probably the thing that I enjoyed the least about the forums. I
Yeah.
enjoy the people on the forums. I enjoy the ideas. I actually enjoy the level of community. It's very, very beautiful compared to other communities I've been in with particularly skilled people in different industries.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I would say is, don't get stuck by a framework of how an industry should be, because it stifles you and it stifles everyone that comes into that space.
The new people with
Yeah, and also yourself. If you're like, but this is the way it was, this is the way it is.
Mm.
Well, is it? Because
Yeah.
there's 15-year-olds on TikTok changing their
Making 10 grand a month.
whole family's lives. Is it
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
But I have to say, I don't say that as lip service. Like, I felt really scared that I had asked Cam to trust this process and that it was totally going to fail.
Thanks so much, first of all, Nat and Cam, for like just being so vulnerable and sharing that so openly. It's a tough position to be in, right? Like you haven't just sold yourself a dream, and there are proof points behind. Well, proof points that you've interpreted behind. As you said, there might be a great deal of body of evidence out there to suggest that zigging when everybody is zagging is the right way to go. But I'm probably keen to then unpick like kind of what still provided you with that compass that we're still on the right track. So you kind of are doubting yourself. You're thinking about the responsibility of you're investing your own time and energy into this, your partner's time and energy into this. What was the mantra, the mindset, the action plan? What then kind of got you back on believing in yourself and that this is still an action path worth committing to?
Yeah, I think I would say that, I mean, obviously there were heaps of points along the way where like I had doubt, not doubt in you, but like doubt in the project, like whether this is actually
Yeah.
going to be something. Like my mindset with anything I put my time into is like, I am going to work as hard as I can to make this as successful as I can possibly make it.
Yeah.
So I go into any project having that in mind. And I think a lot of that comes from like a sporting background as well. So I said to Nat, I was like, I want us to be the next Cards Against Humanity. I want us to be massive. Like, and
Yeah.
you were at like some points, like you were laughing at me. I was like, come on, we can do this. I believe it. We
Yeah.
can be massive. So
Yeah.
like that was like my overarching North Star, like the whole
Yeah.
way. But
Yeah.
at the point in time when I had doubts, I guess I'll probably say the first thing. Like, I think that when I look at other people making games, I think that you can either make games because you love making games and you want to make games for yourself and for for people, for friends and for family. Like that's one way to do it, and that's awesome. And you can also make board games the way that we wanted to do it. We wanted it to be a business. So on that path, I at the points where we doubted ourselves, like I just went back to, you know, what kind of decisions do we have a good product? Have we catered to who our target audience is, and have we made smart business decisions or decisions that are in line with what our target audience would want? And it's like the answers to those questions was yes, we haven't made any emotional decisions. We've made calculated, smart business decisions. So we've given ourselves the best possible chance to succeed. And then a lot of hoping and wishing and praying. And every time one of us had like an eyelash that came out, like wishing on an eyelash.
Oh my God, we wished on like, I don't even know how we have eyelashes left. I reckon we wished on like 400 eyelashes.
Over the course of 2 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wishing.
But to Cam's point, actually, you missed like a really important thing that you always say.
Okay, what's that?
That, and you don't use this in the sense of games, but you use this, Cam is the king of using anecdotal evidence but making it palatable. So Cam loves to tell a story and to make something relatable. And when we think about creating a game or a business or anything in life, aren't we looking for something that is already familiar that we can relate to? But then doesn't quite exist.
Just a little bit new, adaptive.
And not the replication of an existing thing where you change a few things, because that is what we see time and time and time again, not just in board game creation or what have you, but in business at this moment. But isn't it, for me, it was, okay, well, you've got a drawing game, you've got a word game, you've got a miming game, you've got a game where you mimic people. But for me, it was like, this is a mechanic everyone understands, but then there's just this huge gap in the middle of it. I'm not replicating a taboo. I'm not replicating a Pictionary. I'm not replicating a charades. I'm creating something that exists entirely in a space that exists, which it's very difficult in this day and age to find a space. But then we've also added all these mechanics of all these different things that we love. So if we just took a taboo and made a sound-based taboo, then that's all we've done. You know, but we didn't. We're like, wow, there's something familiar that we can then put our own spin on. And so
flavor of new.
There's a lot of podcasts I've listened to recently where people are like, well, you just have to like take existing ideas and put a spin on them. I don't believe in that. I believe in find something that feels familiar and then find your way to express that. We have so many senses in our body, so many ideas, so many different mindsets. How do we take something that feels like we know it, but we don't quite know it?
Beautifully expressed. And this is a horrible job of paraphrasing it because I'm taking one specific part of it. But I think if I'm to play all that back with what got you through, certainly Cam, what got you through, Nat, I'm keen to understand if you have any build on top of this as well, knowing that you were hiding some of your anxiety from your life and business partner. Despite all those eyelashes and the
wasn't hiding it, I was like crying in a heap.
Meatballs, give me cuddles. I think that like having a North Star, right, I think is absolutely critical. And I like the fact that you're unashamedly saying this is a business, right? This is a business for us and we want it to be commercially successful. I think even at times I get a little bit apologetic about my stuff. Maybe a little bit different when you have a full-time job and it's all about letting your employees know, quite rightly so, that that's still what's bringing in the bacon and that's still priority number one. But I think that not being ashamed of that being your North Star and being really comfortable on that. But I think for me, the 4 areas to collate, Cam, you mentioned 3 of them, and now I'm very crudely paraphrasing yours. But the one, like, do you believe in the white space? So do you believe that there is opportunity for something like this to be executable? And your frame on that is familiar but slightly different in a way that isn't just a rip-off by adding or removing a component. So it's like, hey, do we believe that the white space exists? Tick. Do we then believe that we've created the product to effectively execute on this white space? Tick. And you had a number of proof points through packs and through your own circle and your own networks that validated that, yeah, you know what? Might not be 100% the finished product, but we know we've got a product here that'll work. Tick. Do we know who our target market is? Tick. Do we have an understanding on how to connect with our target market? Tick. Okay, that's very different to what the norm is, but hey, we're comfortable with that. And then the overarching kind of last point, which in many ways is a sum of the parts anyway, is like objectivity, right? It's like, have we made good decisions, or can we have a look at the decisions that we've made and clinically, logically look at them without emotion and actually think, are we on the right track or not?
Yep.
I think they're just great questions for any aspiring game designer to ask. And one, it's all very logical, like there's no emotion that's come into that at all. But again, is there an insight behind it? How have we executed the insight? Do we have a market who we understand? Because if you don't answer those three questions, then you're probably going to find it really tough to come up with an idea that works, let alone scale it, right? So kudos for kind of asking yourself such meaningful questions to emerge out of the state of vulnerability and getting the sounds back on track.
We should hire him because like that was way less rambling, but like
not at all.
Summary.
Not
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, two points to that. One is that was a really, really good summary.
Oh, thank you guys.
So well done. And then
I'll make sure I mention it in the recap then as well.
And then second thing I will say is that, you know, it's easy to look back and be like, oh yeah, we made all the right logical decisions, right? But that, you know, the decisions we made, the impactful decisions that we made, yes, they were logical, but there was a lot of emotions and flailing and crying happening in the background that we just didn't, we had those reactions and processed those emotions, but didn't allow that to govern the business decisions that we made. So there was heaps of emotions, just to clarify.
Yeah. Oh, but still, it sounds like you in your own way managed to separate them, right? Or that you could look past, the emotion, say, okay, I'm feeling in this state where I'm not 100% comfortable with everything, but like still, what's the question that I need to answer, or what's the North Star that I'm seeking? And to use your analogy before now, like, okay, we're at point A, like how do we get to C? How do we get to D? How do we eventually get to Z? So there was still an underlying strain of logic underpinning it. To kind of go back to a comment that you mentioned before, I'm all probably backtracking a little bit to the we're just going to go at it and we're just going to give it a crack and think big and see what happens. But I think from that, you made the comment before on you're still really purposeful and strategic on kind of when to hit pause, to take a step back, reflect on the action plan, the questions that you're asking, but then a mix of risk-taking behavior. It's like, you know, we just have to do it. We're thinking differently. We feel we have momentum. We feel we have the answers to those questions, so we're just going to do it. How do you balance between the two? Because they're almost at competing ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think I've got a good answer to this one. So probably a really good thing that's helped me personally in balancing that that like risk taking versus reflection and pausing is so my parents tried to be entrepreneurs and they were extremely unsuccessful.
Okay.
They tried twice, and every time they tried was they quit their jobs and they put all the money savings that they had at the time into that one business at any given time. So you're putting all the eggs in one basket, right? Pushing all the chips into the middle. So the risk that you're taking there, if you fail, it is going to be catastrophic. You're not just affecting your life, you're affecting your family's life. So when we have a decision on the table to do something risky, I think the way we go about it is like, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, how badly is it actually going to impact us? We had to make a decision a little while ago. We had a beatboxer that was going to make some content for us, and he has 55 million followers on TikTok. So that's a lot of people, right? But we've had recently when we've done TikTok influencers partnered with them, some have done really well, some haven't. So that person that has 55 million followers, we could pay them like 20, 30K, which was what the cost was for a video, and that could completely fail. And then that's our entire marketing budget. So even though it would be great to get in front of 55 million people potentially, it just wasn't really worth it.
No, and I'm more of a grassroots person. So
Yeah.
even getting into retail stores in Australia, I'm a bit of a stalker.
Yeah.
Arrestable offence.
No, not
But
not
no,
for
but
legal reasons. No, that's not true.
Yeah.
no, but
Just a
fortunately
figure of
these days
speech.
things go to spam.
Yeah.
But I reckon I sent fucking
200.
but times 20.
Yep.
Yeah.
I spammed every retailer in this country. I
Yeah.
looked up every retailer in this country and emailed them with a pitch. And I have to do a shout out to North Kent Mind Games,
Yeah.
who were our first client.
No, Bright.
Oh, Bright, we
Yes.
matched the game in.
So the toy shop in
Yeah,
Bright.
but they
So
didn't get
good.
the email pitch.
No.
Yeah.
So we matched the game into regional Victoria, got that in. That sold out, which was great. But the first people that took the email pitch were Mind Games in Northcote, and I just believe in sheer harassment and sheer tenacity. So people say,
Perseverance.
"How did you get your game into game stores?" And I'm like, "Well, we made a great game. Then we bought 1,000 of them, and then we had to sell 1,000 of them."
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had to contact people to sell them.
Yeah.
And by the time we kind of took off, we had about 30 retail stores in Australia.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, after we took off, all of those 30 retailers were saying, well, how do we get more? And we're like, well, this is the point where you call your distributor and be like, hey,
Yeah.
you need
We
to
just found a
get
cool
this
game.
game.
Yeah.
You know, so I believe in harassment from every level.
Is that how you balance your risk versus caution?
Yeah, I believe in, I see, and this may be a thing, my time as a low risk investment
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
versus huge capital. And
Yeah.
I want to caution that with the fact that we are people who have jobs, pets, partners, families, life, and that saying that our time is of less value than money could be probably one of the worst things that we ever say about ourselves in the grand scale of our life.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to caution that. But unfortunately, that's where I'm at as a person, where I feel that my time is far less valuable than us costing ourselves financial resources.
Yeah.
And to then switch that the other way, now that the game is going a different way, I've had to realize that putting money into taking resource and time away from myself is an extraordinarily valuable commodity to save the important relationships in my life.
Yeah.
But it is, I don't think that there'll be many entrepreneurs on here or any creators on here that don't devalue their time versus capital output. And I don't think that there'll be any creators on here that then also say that I've never seen a side effect to devaluing my time.
Yeah.
Just to build on very quickly on the trading your time for cost point.
Yeah.
I probably about 8 years ago, I was going to CrossFit St Kilda quite frequently.
Yeah.
And when I was an avid CrossFitter, and at the time, the person that was going to my classes was a guy by the name of Josh Leffers, and he is actually one of the owners of Ballers, which is one of those like adult arcades in the city.
Yeah.
I think they're now opening their third store.
Yeah.
So I had this really ambitious idea about developing warehouses into apartments, which almost everyone in the construction industry has. And so I went to him with this like really cool presentation, and I thought he was amazing in a coffee
Yeah,
shop. He gave me his time, and
yeah,
I went through the presentation, and he probably didn't listen to half of it. And he took out a napkin and he said, "This, starting out a new project or a new business, this is the one thing you need to know. I'm going to draw you a circle, and in the circle, you draw me a wedge of everything that you think you need to do to get this project off the ground and to get it moving. And the things that you can do yourself, you do. And the things that you can't do, you go find someone to help you do it
yeah,
for you." And and if you don't know if you don't know what needs to go into the circle, what goes onto the wedge, copy someone else's business that's successful in that area. And I thought that that was really, powerful, because that's what we do, right? We like look at how far can we push it, how much can we learn to do things ourselves. And if
yeah.
we can't, if it's going to take us too long to learn or whatever, then we go find someone and we partner with people that can do that thing and help us grow.
And that's a great thought bubble, Cam, and thanks so much for sharing that. What does partnership look like then? Like when you say like you want to partner with people, like you mentioned the beatboxer, oh, 100%,
Well,
absolutely. But in terms of your collective expertise, so that's kind of
Yep.
one area. But when you then say partner with others to, break the next deadlock and kind of break through into the next kind of wave of growth, yeah, like what does that look like for yourselves in terms of, I guess, the expertise that you're seeking or the types of personalities, how you work with them? What are some of those areas that you feel are important?
So I want to separate something very quickly. I want to separate marketing versus your team of trusted people.
Yeah,
So when I say marketing, I'm not talking about a marketing manager. That's in
yeah,
your trusted team.
yeah,
I'm talking about how do we get maximum reach for minimum buck?
yeah,
Simply put the time in, do the research, know who your target market is, go through every social media platform, search every hashtag, every what have you, find who's peaking, see who parallels with you, and go and get quotes from them.
yeah,
The biggest things that we have made money from, we've spent around $900 on, and that we've done 2 so far. So we did a $900 one that got us nearly 13 million views. We
yeah.
became viral.
Viral, yeah,
Great investment. Huge. Set our company up for success.
yeah,
We recently did another 100 USD investment, and we did 1,000 sales in 3 days.
yeah,
Wonderful. And this is on our website, and this is through our fulfillment channels. This has nothing to do with distribution. We
yeah,
just want to clarify that with all the distribution agreements we've signed, we have kept 100% control
Of Amazon.
of
Yeah.
our online sales, Amazon, our website, what have you. So I think lowest investment for the biggest buck. It just takes a huge amount of manpower to be like, I know my target market. What are they watching? Who are they watching? How do I negotiate with those people? So let's park that, and then let's talk about who do we trust and who do we invest in. So for us, we invest in our graphic designer. We have very particular ideas that we like to fight and argue about. And we have an amazing graphic designer who just basically blows them to obliteration and then delivers something amazing. And we're like, this is why we
Beautiful
pay you. A gap that we realized is we can blow up on TikTok and become number one on Amazon in Australia and become huge around the world. But these are fads, and they move in waves, and they're great waves for us. Don't get me wrong. As a new game, They're amazing.
Yeah.
But what we need is consistent marketing, Facebook, Instagram.
Yeah.
How do you know, like, how do you know how much you've bid and for how long and what the A/B testing is? And we don't know. We have
Yeah.
no idea.
Mm.
But we're really open-minded and we are really open to sharing information and ideas. And I'd like to believe that we're really kind-hearted in this industry. I'd like to believe that because I've been a bit of an asshole in other industries I've been in, which has led to us being invited to conferences, meeting people, and really finding someone specialized now in marketing who, as Cam mentioned before, worked for Google in advertising for years, now
Yeah.
has his own board games, is
Sabotage.
doing amazing. Sabotage, Eric from Sabotage. We just brought him into our team so that he can do what he does best, Facebook and Instagram, managing those algorithms and what have you. It would take us 20 years to know what he knows. And in 20 years, Facebook and Instagram won't even exist.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like there's no
Yeah.
possible way we can catch up with that. So invest in the team that have that knowledge in that space
That you don't have.
that you don't have.
Yeah.
Not because you're lazy. Go hard and be proud of your product, but also know when you don't know.
Yeah.
But also know that tech and what's familiar and the way people shop and the way people buy changes. The trick with board games is we create them because they're physical, tangible things, like a record, a book, a game. They bring people together. You can feel them, you can touch them, what have you. And man, I feel like you can't replace that.
Yeah.
But in order for it to be something in this current world, you have to tap into the resources that you don't have.
Yeah. And two things to that. So the reason why I'm so drawn to TikTok, I mean, you were really passionate about that from the get-go. But TikTok, by Gen Z, TikTok is now used more than Google as a search engine. So
That is nuts. What a killer stat that is.
Yeah, so you got to go where your audience is, and remove the emotion out of it. Like I see people get really passionate about, okay, well, people will come to me, or, you know, I'm really married to this space or this idea. If you are in it, if your strategy is like ours, it's we want to make a business, then you need to go where your audience is. And the second thing I will say to your question about, you know, partnerships, what does that look like? Have agreements in place with written agreements with anyone that you work with that you allow into your business. We have experienced the kindest people go despicable because money starts getting involved. So the thing that I've really learned recently is have written agreements in place so you have the luxury of being naive and believing in the best in people.
Yeah. Gosh, guys, incredible advice. And I think that even to kind of loop back to kind of the genesis of this thread, right? It's like, know that wedge, right? Like in the areas that you can do yourself, assess how you view your time. Appreciate that there is a cost to time, and that cost isn't just to yourselves but to others. So to think about, pressure test that opportunity cost, but also bootstrap, right? You got to hustle. If you're not going to hustle for yourself, nobody is, right? So just kind of embrace that. Appreciate the trade-off, but embrace it. But then the parts of the wedge that you need to bring in, do the research again, do the time. Who are those right people? Not just with the right skill sets, but the right personalities. But protect yourself from buying a lemon at the same time, which it sounds like you've done as well through having agreements in place, right? Like as much as we all like to, and I'm probably guilty of this a little bit as well, as much as we all like to believe in the beauty of the handshake, right? And that we'll all follow through. Sometimes it's just really beneficial to have the commitments written down. You know, I will give you X if you do Y for me Z times. Mate, you didn't do Y for me Z times, so we can't pay you X. Again, it takes emotion out of it, right? Because now you're actually...
Andrew, to confess, I'm the confessor here.
There you go.
We didn't do that. So
with one person in particular.
yeah,
Yeah,
we
okay.
had someone at the very start who was one of the drunk people on the couch,
Yeah,
and they quit before we had a game, what have you.
yeah,
But we recently went through hell with them. So in the time that we should have been celebrating the successes of the game, this success became a really frightening thing for
sure.
us.
Okay. Yeah,
Because I think that, I mean, you're, so we believe in like that people are wonderful.
yeah,
We've met you, we believe that you're wonderful. We would like jump into business with you tomorrow. There's still a naivety to that.
yeah,
But the thing is that when there's like handshake agreements or ideas on the table, or there's nothing written and you believe that people are good and kind, when things take off or there's money involved, people
Yeah.
do weird things.
yeah,
And to Cam's point, it's so important, and it seems I always feel in business like kind of revolting if I'm like talking about ideas with someone and we're like, let's do this thing, and it kind of seems revolting to me to be like, oh, we should probably put that in writing and sign
yeah,
something.
yeah,
But to Cam's point, it's so important because what the damage that it can do if you do become successful and the way that people's minds turn, it can be so damaging to everything that you've created. And
yeah,
I just wish that if we are good and honest and open people, then contracts should be good and honest and open dialogue. But for
yeah.
some reason, we find that like a barrier to honesty, when that's probably the most honest thing that we
True.
can do for one another.
Yeah,
We do this, you do that, this is what happens, worst case scenario, this XYZ.
yeah,
And you take that away and the law gets involved. It's such a cloudy, muddy, expensive experience that I just wouldn't wish upon anyone.
yeah,
And so we don't give that advice because we
did it
we
right.
did it right. We
left
did it
hard.
wrong.
yeah, yeah,
And because we really had the faith that you had, like you work with nice people, some of your best friends,
yeah,
and you're like, let's do a fun thing. Some people have the appetite, some people don't, but don't think if they don't have the appetite that they won't show up if things take off.
yeah, 100%. And I think to put a slightly, I mean, again, guys, like thanks for being so vulnerable and authentic in sharing that. I think for me, for anybody else listening out there who might also feel that putting something in writing is a little bit jarring, I think for me, it's just, if anything else, again, go back to your earlier point, it takes the emotion out of it, right? It's actually just a really clear way of saying, here's what we're committing to each other, right? Because it's so easy to get swept up in words and there might be a few drinks involved, and then you kind of go 3 months down the track and it's like, oh, didn't we say that we're going to do that? It's like, oh, yeah, but you said you were going to do that. It's like, no, I thought you said you were going to do that. Like, that's your wheelhouse. So it's like, unless you actually have a document that says, I'm going to do this and you're going to do that, and this is how we're going to share in the financial reward if it gets that far.
Yep.
Just having that sense of objectivity, right? Like,
Yeah.
absolutely
It's
critical.
so foreign though. It's so foreign and you feel weird. Like you feel, I felt at times like I'm always betraying people if I'm like, let's write it down. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, but to the
Yeah.
point now where even we have a shareholders agreement in place.
yeah.
Oh yeah, and I will.
It's super
I'm
important.
taking all your shit if you buy.
Meatballs, it's all mine.
No, I can't feed meatball. I'm a terrible mum.
Nat has fed Meatball 4 times. Meatball's going to die. All of this, that'll.
Great, cool. So, guys, I guess like transitioning out of risk and reward and how you spend your time and who you collaborate with. It's a fun game, right? The sound game. It's meant to bring people together. That's what was the inspiration behind the game in COVID. What's the funniest experience that you've had in creating this?
Definitely the funniest experience. Oh, we've had heaps of funniest experience, but in terms of engaging, I guess, with the community, the funniest experience was when we were writing the rule book and we were deciding are we going to call it die or dice.
Oh, wow,
And we have
controversial.
a single die, but it just sounded so wrong to me to call it die. And so Nat, in all her wisdom, had decided to ask every single board game forum that we're a part of, and literally we like open up the biggest can of worms about how we didn't understand the English language or grammar.
Wow.
To the point where Clay, someone by the name of Clay,
Oh my God, Clay!
this guy by the
Oh,
name of
God.
Clay had created a poll in a separate forum, getting
No.
people to comment, not because he wanted to help us, because he wanted to prove that we're idiots for wanting to call
We
it
had
dice.
people saying if we read in a rule book that you said dice for a single die, we would think you were idiots and burn your game, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we did all this research on language, get the rule book.
Yeah, I'll get the rule.
We made a joke. So we'll read you the joke. So we really went back and forth on this, and we were just like, you guys are fucking dickheads.
I
Sorry,
don't think you can say
I
that.
can't say that. You guys are wonderful, and we're so glad we showed up to the forum.
We're so appreciative for your feedback.
We're
Thank you
so
for your kind
appreciative
words.
for the feedback. We also went and did a lot of research on language
Yeah.
outside of your general board game opinions.
Mm.
And so in the questions
In the rule book, yeah.
in the rule book, we have this little section
Ooh,
that
yes.
says, why did you use the word dice when there is only one die? And then we said, because language has evolved and dice can be used as a singular and plural. This is a hill we are willing to dice on.
That's good.
And if you don't get the joke, you
Case
shouldn't be
closed.
playing our
Yeah.
fucking game.
You're not our target audience.
You're not our target market, but I'm so glad you bought the game to read our fucking rule book, you idiot.
Andrew's going to have to do a lot of bleeping.
Oh, it's so good. I don't know if my editing skills are good enough to bleep, guys. So, but hey, it's all real, right? That is
But
gold.
honestly, it was one of my most famous posts of all time.
Yeah, for all the hate that it got.
Dice. Oh my God, we had death threats and told we were idiots. Then we had linguists saying language has evolved.
People said they were going to burn our game.
People said they were going to burn our game.
Man, there's more to life, right? Like, surely there's more to life.
And then we were also just like, those people are never going to buy our game.
Yeah.
I think we should just do what we want.
Yeah, exactly right. In order to burn that sound game, they have to have purchased that sound game first, right?
Yeah, it works out well
And
for us.
also,
It doesn't exactly sound like they're lining up to.
They'd be like, roll the dice, roll it, do it, roll the dice. They're not
Yeah.
going to be like, oh, roll the die, roll the die.
Oh,
So
gosh.
good. And, it's important during this crusade to find the light moments, right? Like,
But I don't know, we're idiots. We are assholes. And another funny moment, I have to say, and I apologize to everyone at DevCon last year, because I really came in like a bull.
Hot-headed.
Hot-headed. And there was some dude from some distributor saying, you should get us to distribute and blah, blah, blah. And everyone was like, yeah. And I was like, excuse me. And then I asked all these questions about why would we ever distribute with you when you give
$2.
$2 a game, where the people who created it put all their investment in time, blah, blah, blah. And then in typical Nat fashion, exactly like I've done in this podcast, I then asked a further 7 questions or explained the 7 further answers. And then
Yeah.
at the end of it, when I could see that the entire room was very uncomfortable with my line of questioning,
Particularly me.
particularly Cam. Cam's like, she was like basically like hitting me, like, stop it, stop it. And
Time out.
yeah. We start with like slight grabs on the thigh, but then when it progresses, she's like, stop it. and then I was like, oh, I've stopped arguing with these people trying to steal all our knowledge and game. Like, I've stopped. And then I just said, thank you for the floor. And everyone at DEF CON
Remembers that.
systematically hated me in that moment and thought we were idiots. And then our game took off, and I just want to say
Thank you.
thank you for the floor, and I'm super apologetic that it offended you.
And you're looking forward to seeing everybody this October. So much so that you've even generously offered a bedroom to stay in as well.
We are really looking forward to seeing everyone. We don't know if they're looking forward to seeing us.
Oh, what's a year between long lost friends, right? Oh, so good. Well, guys, recapping on our last podcast, as you know, it's habit to kind of close the podcast with a question for me for the recap and then a question for the community. Just to recap everybody, because my last episode was a while ago now. The last question was, how do you continue momentum through the ups and downs of game design? I'm pretty comfortable that we've already covered that off with what the crew have shared. I think the team were very open and very vulnerable with a lot of the trials and challenges and questions that they asked themselves, but then also how they got themselves through it. So if it's all right with the community, I'm going to park that one to one side. But the floor is now yours, ladies. What question would you like to ask me?
I want to know that, I mean, you've got a really successful game and you've gotten it onto the shelves, and I think that that's incredible and one of the rare stories in Australia. Like, what's the one thing piece of knowledge that you've learnt that you think that every single game designer in Australia should know?
Oh, great question.
Great question.
Thank you.
Great question. That's me buying myself some thinking time as I try to think of an equally great answer. No, look, I think for me,
We can do some music.
yeah, some thinking music, some sounds.
Well,
Some sounds in
introduce
the
the
background.
audience to Meatball.
Yeah, and while Andrew is thinking, also, you think, don't
Yeah.
pay attention, think.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, we just want to say that it's been amazing to meet Andrew and members of this community. And there are people that really want to support each other, and it's really nice to meet one another. And to offer support and advice, and not even that, like, offer anything that you can offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what we thought the board game community would be like, but it's been phenomenal being part of those communities and meeting you all. So
Aw.
I
Well
think
said, Nat.
Andrew's like ready for his answer.
I think I am, yeah. I think for me, my overall umbrella is I've defaulted back to being a numbers geek. I've defaulted back to the economics of it.
Yep.
But I think for me, the economics is a bit of it goes back to your earlier piece before, is understand how, if you want to make a business out of it, understand how to make a business out of it, I think. And I'm quite lucky that I guess I work in consumer goods for a day job. So I probably got extra insight with, not necessarily on the supply chain side, but especially how to take an idea and sell it into a retailer and get it on the shelf, and then ultimately, hopefully, getting it selling through so that ultimately you get more reorders, and then you can scale, and then you can get into bigger retailers, and especially in your case, into bigger countries. So I think from my perspective, and it's largely how FMCG businesses are kind of broadly structured, but there are kind of four key areas so I kind of think through there. First of all, have an understanding on how it's going to be supplied. And it's great that some previous guests have kind of also spoke about this as well, that you can't have a game if you don't know how it's being supplied. So, hustle to understand how ultimately you're going to take not even just getting an idea to a prototype form, but how you're actually going to commercially supply big enough volumes to help actually scale this business. Because almost going back to your point before about the beatboxer, let's just say it went even more viral than what you guys have gone, right? You've got 13 million views on Insta and TikTok. This guy has 55 million followers. Who knows? It could have been a bet that didn't pay off. It could have been a bet that paid off so much that you did 300,000 units worth of sales, and it would actually take you potentially a year to manufacture and ship out all that stock. And then all of a sudden you're going to have 300,000 really pissed off consumers that they bought a product on the expectation you could supply it straight away, and you haven't. So I think understand your supply chain and understand end-to-end as best as possible. Going back to your wedge analogy, you're not going to have expertise out of all of it. You will need partners within that, and I'm very lucky that I have partners for Footy Feud with importing it to Australia, especially like you guys have with your global contacts, but understand the supply chain side of things. Probably the next logical step after that is then understand the financials. So if you know what's your cost price roughly going to be based on volume thresholds, also understand like roughly what should your pricing strategy be? Like how are you going to price your game? What's the competitive set? Yes, you've carved out a unique niche. It isn't just a copy me too, but what's your pricing strategy going to be? But then have an understanding on who's going to take cuts in the middle, because what a retail's for, less tax, is not what you get to keep. Like it's just not right, because you need retailer needs to get their cut, wholesaler needs to get their cut. In my case, the AFL needs to get their cut. So just have an understanding then of the finances, the cash flow requirements as well. This is a very cash flow intense business. Sometimes you have to buy your stock up front. Retailers don't often pay all at once, right? They often have payment terms that are months down the track. So just understand the finance side of it. Thirdly is in the sales channel. So a bit of an extension on that point, but you're more now thinking about where do you want your game to be sold. So again, really great decision that you guys have made. All online sales. Online is a scalable channel for yourselves. We're having full control of this. Bricks and mortar, we don't have the capability or the appetite to be able to literally hustle to every door in America like you email
100%.
every door in Australia. but fundamentally, know where you want your game to be. So for me, like my compass for Footy Feud is I want Footy Feud to be everywhere Uno is, or footy cards are, which that's an ambition, right? That's not necessarily a goal, but it's enough to provide a compass on what type of outlets I want Footy Feud to be in. And I know we've had chats before about, is it mass market? Is it the friendly local game store channel? What other channels are there as well? What's the heartland? What's the test and learn? Have a framework around what your sales channels are. And then lastly, which you guys have absolutely nailed, what's your marketing approach, right? So you've got this great game that's insightful, that's cost effective, that you think you can make money on because you know where you're going to sell it. But if you don't know how to tell people about it, you don't know how to tell people that it's fun, or you don't know what they're interested in, then, you've got a really great game that's going to collect dust. And what's that going to happen then? Then a retailer is going to think, okay, great, I took a punt on it, fantastic, great, it didn't work on, move on to the next thing. While we're there kind of thinking, oh, great, we had the opportunity right in front of us, we weren't fully able to capitalize it. So I think that's the overall piece. It's still more business now as opposed to just, I have a game, it's going to go gangbusters. But yeah, I would encourage everybody to break it down into, we'll all have our different ways of cutting and slicing it, but they're the four main ones for me. So supply chain, broad financials, cost price, sales price, who takes what cut in between. Ultimately, where do you want it to be sold? What market, what channel, who do you need to distribute into those channels? And lastly, how are you going to market it?
Great.
Great answer.
How does that
So
sound?
I have one thing to that, like
Please do.
very quick. That can be independent, that can be publishing, that can be distributors, what have you. There's so many platforms and so many different appetites. But if you don't understand what yours is, and if you don't go for it, then you're in the abyss of game creators.
Yeah.
And we are so happy to have built the start of a friendship with you, Andrew. We're so amazed by what you've done in Australia, and we can't wait to see what you do globally.
Yeah, I second that.
No, thanks, guys. And I think to even kind of recap on this mindset that we have to win in Australia before we win overseas, full transparency, I'm guilty of that, right, guys? And I think for everybody listening in through meeting the team, I've been very lucky enough to meet and have dinner shouted last week and on the podcast this week. That's been a real kind of realization for me that I think a lot of us view this pursuit as it's a bit of a risk-taking thing. Like for not many of us, this is our main hustle. Like I know I hadn't had Keith on the show a few episodes ago that he's one of the few full-time game designers in Australia. So I've kind of even seen it for myself as, I have a very steady, a very, well, a great full-time job. I can't underplay that enough. And this is kind of my risk-seeking appetite. But it's like, man, risk-seeking in Australia is not really risk-seeking, right? And the team kind of showed me that as much as I thought the shackles have been fully off, in many ways the shackles have been fully on. So I certainly thank yourselves for broadening my perspective on that in a way that I can embrace, not just in my side hustle, but also in my full-time gig as well, where I can embrace a bit of unconstrained thinking a little bit more, and thinking more blue sky and how to blow stuff up is a pretty creative, exciting mindset to be in, and I think it's what brought a lot of us into this space in the first place. So,
I think so.
Thanks, ladies.
Do you remember what percent of our market Australia is?
2.
Our Australian market is 2%.
Yeah.
So then we've got 2% going to the UK, 1% going to Canada, and the rest is going to the US.
Yeah.
I can't stress that enough. And if you don't get your game into the US, we're gonna come and not do anything bad, but make fists like we're gonna do something bad.
If you don't do it, someone else will, right?
Yeah, well, 100% true, right? And I think, guys, to recap, again, thanks for sharing everything that you've shared. It's a great success story, and you've got such a really clear vision on what's got you to where you are, where you want the sound game to go, and that's really clear with US domination, which you're already dominating over there already, but just amplifying it to the max. I think for me, some of the key themes that I've written down here is a recap. First big one is, again, that North Star. That North Star for yourselves is a business, but you really pressure tested your model. So kind of even just going back there, Nat, on your last build, it was the model that you just didn't think, we're going to do Kickstarter because everybody else is doing Kickstarter, or we're just going to start in Australia because that's what everybody does. It's no, we're going to really pressure test both of those essentially hypotheses that that's the way how to do things. It didn't feel right to yourselves to begin with, so I think that probably helped you pressure test it. But once you gained enough proof points, and for everybody those proof points will be different, it'll be feedback, it'll be observations, it'll be friendly debate between business partners. Really pressure test what's your way in, how are you going to get this going, how you're going to scale it, and that will be different for all of us, guys. So again, no one size fits all, no one answer is correct. I think then secondly, following on from that, is that when you have those tough moments, when you're questioning yourself, have those questions you can come back and ask. And those 4 questions, collating both of your knowledge together, was, is this white space here, or is there really an insight here that I am tapping into, or is it my own creativity maybe that I'm getting ahead of? How well they executed that? So does the product actually stack up? Is there a target market that I know and understand? And then, the decisions that we have made and the path that we're on, objectively, are we comfortable with that? And I think that whenever all of us get stuck, and we all get stuck, we all have our moments where we question why we're doing this, how long we're going to question it for, what's the longevity of it. Therefore, pretty good compasses to come back to. I'll probably give it some thought offline as well, but I think that's a pretty useful steer for when we're all in that position. I think the third kind of key one for me is just how to assess risk. And as much as you've taken a lot of punts, a lot that, yes, have been very well thought through and very logical, you kind of had this balance of how you value your time, both as a legitimate cost, not just for yourself, and that as an example, but, from a relationship perspective, how you manage your energy outside of game design. But then by the same token, you have that grassroots tenacity by the same token. And you kind of, going back to the wedge analogy, Cam, that you shared, it's well, if I have expertise here, I'm going to go gung-ho myself on this. And yes, I understand the costs, and maybe that the costs aren't forever. I can't do this forever, but I'm going to go gung-ho now, and at least I'm fully understanding what I'm getting into. And I think how you assess that risk-reward trade-off, time versus financials, is also really critical. So thanks again, guys, for sharing so openly, and so much gold there that I'm sure our community will benefit from. And hopefully a few new subscribers after this episode as well, guys. We're 9 episodes in, both on YouTube and on wherever you get your podcasts as well. So as per always, any questions, comments, feedback for either myself or that Sound Game team, would very much appreciate how we can continue to make this community better. So thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time.